Daystar had been surrounded by rumors for years, but until recently, nothing solid had emerged. Joni Lamb's well-preserved image has been shattered by Julie Royce's recent revelation. The specifics of a secret that was kept well concealed behind closed doors have come to light, and they are more startling than anyone could have ever dreamed. This is not your typical scandal. It's the realization that might permanently alter Daystar's life. For millions of viewers, Joni Lamb had spent decades creating an image that looked nearly indestructible. She was more than just a TV personality. After her husband, Marcus Lamb, passed away, she was a woman who had taken up the burden of a Christian network and was a reliable voice. People respected her composure, her empathy, and her ability to transform even the most upsetting subjects into discussions about faith and hope. She was now a living representation of. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. And hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Now, back to the topic. What we were talking about was the mission of Daystar. A face that evoked kindness, loyalty, and trust in spectators worldwide. Giving to Daystar was like giving directly to God's work for many. And the center of that piece was Joni. However, when investigative journalist Julie Royce began to raise questions, that perception started to change. This was not a stranger looking to cause trouble. Julie had visited Daystar before. She collaborated extensively with Marcus and Joni from 2007 to 2011, gaining first-hand knowledge of the network's functioning. She was familiar with the culture, the people, and the systems. She saw the clues that something more significant might be lurking beneath the surface as minor reports of dubious expenditures started to circulate. In addition to casting Joni's reputation in the worst possible light during her career, what she discovered would also cause innumerable viewers to lose faith in her. Had unquestioningly believed in her. Whispers about money caused the first fissures. First, minor issues, such as claims of extravagant travel, pricey apparel, and funds being utilized for objectives completely unrelated to the ministry's mission. Then came the most devastating surprise. The funds for Daystar's private plane purchase came entirely from donations. For those who thought they were sponsoring missions with their last few dollars. Disaster aid or Bible outreach. It was frustrating to consider that their donations might have been used on opulent vacations. The jet soon became an emblem of luxury in a ministry that advocated humility, representing everything that detractors said was wrong. Joni's followers wanted to think that everything was a misunderstanding and that the aircraft was a more efficient way to share the gospel. That's precisely what Daystar said. Julie's investigation, however, revealed a different picture. She discovered proof the jet was utilized for purposes other than ministry travel. It was also utilized in private, turning into a discreet benefit for the elite. The reality she was discovering did not align with the theories. And for the first time in years, Joni's reputation as a modest, unassuming leader started to appear shaky. After our honeymoon, we returned home. Oh, it occurred in July. By the way, there are a lot of concerns online regarding Daystar paying $100,000 for yes, and I was about to ask you about that. Therefore, no. For our honeymoon, not a single penny of Daystar's money was spent. We covered the cost of our honeymoon. Alright, so that's another untruth that has been exposed. At first, the change was subtle. Online viewers began to ask questions, some even went so far as to address the network directly, while others just stopped contributing. This was risky territory for a ministry that had traditionally been characterized by a sense of trust. Because Joni had been Daystar's untouchable face for so long, her audience found it impossible that she could have been complicit in financial mismanagement. Now, however, the unimaginable was starting to happen. Julie's reporting didn't merely dispute spreadsheet figures. The story Joni had based her entire career on was called into question. Some now viewed the calm, caring leader as a woman defending an extravagant lifestyle under the guise of religion. Joni attempted to answer. She made composed remarks while on camera, characterizing the charges as miscommunications or even assaults on the ministry, but her responses were vague, and her refusal to make the volumes available for public review only served to greater suspicion. Joni had been a genius at relating to viewers and giving them a sense of being seen and appreciated for decades. That connection was severing now. There was more to the affair than a jet or bank account numbers. Trust was at issue. Daystar had been given every dime with faith. Furthermore, many supporters had never anticipated the methods in which their faith was being put to the test. The change was underway in the court of public opinion. Joni Lamb was more than just a religious figure. She was at the center of an expanding scandal that threatened to change her reputation. I can now add more visual details and emotional weight if you'd like. As a result, this part reads more like a compelling documentary script, drawing viewers into the suspense from the opening line. That would increase its impact on your project even more. Daystar functioned for many years in financial secrecy, which few people questioned. The network was exempt from filing the same public financial statements as other NGOs because it was legally classified as a church. That position, in theory, shielded it against needless government intervention. In practice, this meant that the money's destination was hidden from anyone outside the inner circle. Salaries, travel costs, and the distribution of gifts were not publicly available. Trust was the foundation for contributors. Have faith that the promised use of their contributions is being fulfilled. There, they held a semi-annual telethon. It's now called Heart for the World, I believe. There is a room filled with cubicles and phones, and there are hundreds of workers who spend their entire day answering phones. During the telethon, the prayer department was responsible for answering calls from donors. Occasionally, however, the amount of calls would be so great that all employees of the company would have to keep their phones on standby. Thus, this was one of those unique situations. The volume of calls was very high. Just like that, my phone rang. When I respond, it's this adorable tiny. An old woman is crying and informing me that she has a lot of debt. She has no money at all, but she does have a small amount left on her credit card, which she plans to donate to Daystar because the person on the show claimed that if she gave $1,000 today, God would return $10,000. There aren't really enough words to describe how awful I felt when I ran the card and took that card number because something felt so wrong. And I actually stopped for the first time at that point. And questioned, do I want to be a part of this? Is this the kingdom of God? 'Cause I don't know how you can justify that before. When investigative journalist Julie Royce began probing into the few information that was available, that trust started to erode. She conducted interviews with those who had been close to the Lamb family, reviewed tax returns from associated companies, and talked to former workers. She discovered something unsettling. A spending and financial pattern that was inconsistent with the public persona Daystar had so diligently cultivated. Under the guise of ministry, there are rumors of lavish purchases, pricey clothing, five-star travel, and political activity. The most startling disclosure occurred when it was found that Daystar had used money that was donated directly to buy a private plane. This wasn't a side investment made with extra cash. It was funded by donations from viewers, many of whom gave selflessly because they thought their money would be used to help those in need or spread the gospel. Daystar justified the purchase by claiming that it was a ministry tool and a rapid means of travel for conferences, mission trips, and international outreach. However, Julie's research revealed that the jet was also utilized for private purposes, turning it from a ministry requirement into a luxury benefit. Supporters were enraged and perplexed by those findings. Many of them had fully trusted the network and had contributed little amounts, sometimes their last bucks. It felt like a betrayal to find out that the same money might have been used for catered lunches and luxurious leather seats on a private jet. The jet came to represent not only extravagance but also the seeming detour from the purpose by Daystar's leadership. The jet, however, was just the start. Julie discovered more concerning trends as she carried out her research. Daystar might transfer funds internally without external monitoring if it were not required to submit financial reports to the public. This made it possible for them to allocate money to initiatives and causes that might not have been in line with what donors believed they were funding. With Daystar giving some politicians media and visibility throughout election seasons, Julie was able to establish connections between the network and political movements. Both spectators and legal experts were concerned about this blurring of the boundaries between religion and politics for a ministry that professed to be centered on faith. Regarding political involvement, the IRS has stringent guidelines for tax-exempt organizations, and some of Daystar's actions appeared to err on the side of caution. The fire was fueled by former employees. They spoke of a society in which it was considered dishonorable to criticize financial judgments. Some acknowledged they remained silent out of fear of losing their employment, while others said they were shut down when they voiced concerns about expenditures. A painful story about answering phones during a telephone call was revealed by a former call center employee. After hearing a preacher on the air promise that God would repay 10 times the amount, an elderly woman called in sobbing and said she was deeply in debt but wanted to contribute her last $1,000. The employee claimed that because she was aware of how desperate the caller realized that this type of pressure-driven fundraising was typical. Donors have no easy way to see how their money was being spent because of the lack of openness. You were unable to determine the proportion of funds allocated to actual ministry as opposed to overhead or executive benefits. The assurances made by Daystar's leadership that everything was legal were merely words without the books being opened. That wasn't enough for many longer. The public's response to these discoveries was prompt. Donations from longtime viewers who had been with the network for decades started to decline. Some churches completely ceased showing Daystar programming. People told their own tales of being duped while giving to the organization online. The years-long trust was rapidly being undermined. And it's nearly impossible to regain that trust once it's lost. Julie's coverage didn't merely discover the financial trade secrets. It revealed a culture in which reputation appeared to be more important than responsibility. A picture of a ministry functioning more like a corporate empire than a faith-based organization was created by the private jet, the political connections, and the extravagant spending. Furthermore, it was impossible to distinguish between personal indulgence and acceptable ministry expenses in the absence of transparency. To all who had supported Daystar's endeavor, these were heartbreaking discoveries. They were challenging more than just the network. They were doubting their shared faith, the programs they had watched, and even the leaders they had trusted. The harm was not merely monetary. It was intensely personal, emotional, and spiritual. Because this was more than simply budgetary figures in the end. It dealt with unfulfilled promises and the agonizing insight that even when no one is keeping an eye on the finances, ministries can fail. I can now include a follow-up piece if you'd like, which would strengthen the narrative even more by focusing on the emotional repercussions among church congregations and contributors following these revelations. Is that what you want me to do next? Daystar's reputation was weakened by more than simply financial concerns. When politics and wealth began to take center stage, they grew wider. Although the network had a conservative bent for years, the majority of viewers believed that it was founded on religious principles rather than political party ambitions. When programs started overtly endorsing particular political candidates during election seasons, that started to change. It wasn't subtle. At ministry-related events, candidates were brought on television, given a platform to address the audience directly, and occasionally even promoted. That was risky for a tax-exempt religious organization. Territory. The IRS has well-defined regulations. You cannot support political candidates without jeopardizing your nonprofit status, but you can talk about moral problems. Daystar, though, appeared prepared to take that chance. Many supporters believed that the network was going too far, both legally and spiritually. Donors have contributed to ministries rather than political campaigns. They desired to spend money on humanitarian efforts, outreach, and missions rather than political airwaves. Some felt betrayed when their preferred religious network took sides in political disputes. Audiences were split on it. Party divisions were now dividing those who had once stood together in their faith. But another problem was smoldering as politics garnered attention. The way of life of the network's executives. The most well-known example was the acquisition of the private plane. It wasn't the only thing, though. Under the guise of ministry work, rumors of lavish travel, upscale lodging, fashionable clothes, and pricey dinners started to spread. Former workers discussed who had the finest benefits, who was invited on trips, and how choices appeared to be made more for prestige and image than for furthering the objective. They said that Daystar's culture had changed over time. It seemed like a calling in the beginning. Employees believed they were a part of something sacred, worked long hours, and prayed together. The emphasis on appearances increased along with wealth and power. Donors were deeply affected by these experiences. Many of them had made selfless sacrifices. They had called in during telethons or mailed in checks from modest salaries to commit sums that actually put a pressure on their finances. Instead of paying for first-class travel or political rallies, they thought they were assisting in the gospel's dissemination. Additionally, when more information became available, the arguments made by some supporters to defend Daystar, that the jet and the trip were essential tools for a global ministry, became less persuasive. The storyline shifted when Julie Roy's inquiry showed that the jet was occasionally utilized for private purposes. Not only was it unclear if the costs were required, the question was whether they were morally right. At that point, trust started to erode. The foundation of any ministry is trust. The entire foundation trembles without it. Strong, elegant, and unwavering, Joni Lamb had been regarded for years as Daystar's heart, particularly following the death of her husband Marcus. Her reasons felt hazy now, though. She makes a lot of promises. She could not explain why it had been kept so secret, but she did say the jet was for ministry. Though she never recognized the threat to their tax-exempt status, she ignored political activity as a component of the larger objective. Any comment she made was overshadowed by the lack of transparency. Donors and former viewers started venting their own frustration. Social media users responded angrily to posts that supported Joni. Old videos of her discussing ethics and stewardship reappeared, this time with remarks highlighting the discrepancy between her words and deeds. In private, a few churches cut Daystar programming from their calendars. Others publicly called for prudence over the intended use of gifts. Conversations heated up in church foyers and living rooms. After years of worshiping together, people now found themselves on opposing sides of the dispute. The underlying issue was that the controversy revealed more than just dubious political connections or spending. It demonstrated how easily a religious ministry could begin to resemble a commercial conglomerate. The luxury lodgings, the rallies, and the plane all gave the impression that the leaders were living in a different reality than those who were paying for it. And it was nearly impossible to reverse that image once it had taken hold. The way Daystar reacted, more than any one discovery, was the last straw for many. The network remained silent rather than providing a detailed financial analysis or requesting an outside audit. The statements were well crafted and centered on defending the ministry's positive actions rather than responding to the particular charges. Joni never addressed the individuals who felt betrayed or injured directly, instead framing the criticism as an assault on the gospel. The elderly donor who handed her the final $1,000 was not acknowledged. No sense. Thinking that God would give it back tenfold. The employees who attempted to voice concerns internally but were disregarded were not publicly acknowledged. The harm was done by the time the dust began to settle. A portion of the audience was turned off by the political intrigue. The impression of stewardship and humility had been ruined by the extravagant spending, and the lack of openness had validated the worst suspicions of those who thought something was amiss. Although Daystar continued to air, its relationship with its audience had undergone a significant transformation. It is difficult to regain trust once it has been damaged, particularly if it was founded on faith. The realization was devastating for those who had prayed, donated, and believed. No amount of well-produced broadcasts or passionate speeches could reverse the fact that the ministry they believed they knew was not the one they had been supporting. The luxury and the politics had eroded the foundation, but the silence was what ultimately caused the entire building to collapse. I could go on to discuss the long-term effects and how the Daystar incident changed people's perceptions of Christian media in a concluding chapter, which would strengthen the series' ending. Do you want me to do it for you? The Daystar controversy sent shock waves that extended beyond the network. They dispersed over the whole religious community. Initially, there was incredulity. Daystar had been a well-known brand for many years, a resource for spiritual support and hopeful messages. It has been playing in the background of many people's houses while they grew up. Its broadcasts had led some people to Christ, and Joni Lamb was more than simply a television personality to countless fans. She was a representation of strength, particularly following the death of her husband, Marcus. However, the unity surrounding that trust started to erode when claims of financial concealment, political entanglements, and extravagant spending emerged. The discussions were heated in internet forums, small groups, and churches. Some vehemently denied the reports, claiming that Joni was unfairly singled out by the media and religious opponents. They referred to it as spiritual warfare, an assault intended to destroy a woman who had greatly benefited God's kingdom. The details were too obvious for others to overlook. They heard the testimonies of former employees, reviewed the investigative reports, and observed the financial red lights. It wasn't persecution to them. Accountability had long been overdue. The fact that this split involved more than simply a TV network made it terrible. It concerned identity, trust, and what individuals anticipated from their religious authorities. When others criticized Joni, her supporters frequently felt personally attacked, as though the charges were directed at their own religious beliefs. Transparency advocates were deceived by the dismissal of their concerns as slander or rumor. Pastors had to intervene in certain congregations to prevent disputes from degenerating into full-fledged altercations because of the high level of tension. The scandal's financial component was particularly painful. Many contributors had made selfless contributions under the guise of assisting missionaries, feeding the needy, advancing the gospel, and funding ministry operations. They were taken aback to discover that funds might have been used for political objectives, a private jet, or opulent vacations. Some claimed it completely destroyed their faith, not in God, but in the organizations they had put their trust in. They began to doubt not only Daystar but all the ministries they had previously supported. If this were possible, they questioned how many other leaders were concealing themselves behind well-crafted sermons and charitable pleas. The political component widened the divide even more. Some viewers were already uncomfortable with Daystar's overt endorsement of some candidates. It was interpreted by individuals with different political views as evidence that the network had moved from sharing the gospel to promoting a certain agenda. For some, the political position was a logical progression of their principles, and thought the criticism was exaggerated. As a result, the community was divided along political and theological lines and lacked trust. Church leaders were put in a challenging situation. Citing Daystar's lengthy missionary history and the conviction that its overarching objective was still worthwhile, some chose to keep supporting the organization. Others publicly distanced themselves or discreetly pulled its programming from their calendars, advising members to instead donate to local ministries. Members of various churches reacted negatively to this decision, believing that they were abandoning Joni during her ordeal. Those who chose to support Daystar left other locations because they didn't want to be linked to what they perceived to be corruption. Deeper discussions around accountability in Christian groups were also spurred by the crisis. People started to demand more information and raise more pointed questions regarding the use of their gifts. Financial openness from government agencies. Some contributors completely changed the way they gave, opting to support smaller, regional organizations where they could observe the results of their gifts firsthand. Because they were too upset or cautious to trust again, some completely stopped donating. The silent departures were possibly the most tragic consequence. Nobody took sides or argued. Some just turned to leave. They stopped going to some church functions, stopped watching Daystar, and in some cases completely stopped interacting with the Christian community. These were individuals who had experienced a profound sense of connection before becoming disillusioned. They weren't necessarily abandoning their faith, but they weren't sure where to turn because they didn't trust the leadership anymore. The harm done to Joni Lamb could not be undone by Daystar's continuous broadcast. Every public appearance was clouded by the scandal, even as her devoted fans stood at her side. No matter how many passionate statements she gave, the questions would always remain. Additionally, the incident served as a warning to the larger religious community that even the most prestigious ministries are subject to criticism. Ultimately, there was more to the rift brought forth by the Daystar incident than just politics or money. It dealt with the core of the Christian community and what occurs when the principles taught in the pulpit don't seem to align with the behavior that takes place behind closed doors. The discussions were unsettling, but they made believers confront a harsh reality. While faith is unwavering, trust in leaders is brittle. Furthermore, regaining it once it has been damaged requires more than just a broadcast. I can now create a final aftermath and legacy part that connects all of these ideas into a compelling conclusion for the Daystar Expose, if you'd like. As a result, the entire item feels finished and prepared for